Hello and welcome to the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast. I am your host, Matt Infante, joined as always by PFN Deputy Editor Adam H. Beasley. And Adam, I still can't believe what we saw on Sunday. It was a historic day at Hard Rock Stadium. Dolphins became the fourth team ever to score 70 points and the only team to do it in the Super Bowl era. But you were there. What were you thinking as this was all unfolding in front of your eyes?
My God, did the Broncos lie down? I mean, that was the first thought in my mind, because you don't give up 70 points if you try, okay? And we'll get into the X's and O's and how brilliant Mike McDaniel is, and I think Sean McDermott today called him almost revolutionary what he's doing schematically on offense. So 80% of the credit certainly goes to the roster they assembled and how they're utilizing all those incredibly talented players. Incredible. Amazing. They're going to be one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in the league the entire season. But also have some pride, Denver Broncos. I mean, have some pride. Maybe try to tackle. Maybe don't run into each other in coverage and let Tyreek Hill free. I mean, I put on Twitter, if you're going to make a conscious decision to double one dude and not cover the other, the dude you should not cover should not be Tyreek Hill. Okay, let Robbie Chosen run free. Do not let Tyreek Hill. Time and time again, they were totally outmatched, totally outclassed. Sean Payton, Mike McDaniel post game, he made a passing reference to we're all about good karma here at the Miami Dolphins. And it kind of went over my head at the time because so much is going on post game. But in the later, it's like, oh, he was probably talking about the Saints and the Broncos and Sean Payton and all the bad karma he's had over the course of a career, and most specifically recently when he was taking shots at branches of the Shanahan coaching tree. So it was incredible. It was something that we will never see again. Literally, it's a once in a lifetime event. I mean, the last time someone scored that many points, I think, was the 60s. Is that correct? It's been a very long time. It was the most points scored in Dolphins history by 15. Not like, okay, by 2, by 3, by 2 full touchdowns was the next closest. Oh, and by the way, they've been playing Dolphins football for 58 years. 13 team records were either tied or broken that game. Not one, but 2 running backs had 4 touchdowns. I mean, just here's the thing. Any one of these things that we're discussing could be an entire podcast, right? We could talk for 45 minutes about Devon Achane. We could talk for 45 minutes about Raheem Mostert. We could talk for 45 minutes about Tyreek Hill, about Tua Tagovailoa. All those dudes did the same thing in the same game. Like, Tua had the quietest 23 of 26 for 306 yards and what was it? How many touchdowns did he have?
4 touchdowns.
Yeah, the quietest 300-yard 4-touchdown game you will ever see. I mean, that's got to be one of the 20 best passing performances in Dolphins history. And we just kind of shrugged our shoulders because so many other incredible things happened at the same time. It was absolutely insane. And I think it bodes very poorly for the Denver Broncos the rest of the way, but it bodes very well for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, it certainly historic, once in a lifetime. I mean, the last time they topped 50 was 1995. Okay, it was a week 1 game against the Jets. So they hadn't even topped 50 in, almost 30 years. It wasn't the largest margin of victory, by the way.
What does that speak more to, though, of how bad the Dolphins offense has been the last 30 years?
We deserve this as Dolphin fans, okay? And as reporters who had to cover it. I mean, going through the Wannstedt years, and then you have the, celebrating field goals and fail forward fast to Cam Cameron, right? It's deserved to enjoy that game and what we're witnessing, on offense this year, because we've been through a lot as fans and people who cover the team as well. It's been a while.
And I think it's about time to start not just talking about the Dolphins, how they compare in their own franchise's history, but I think it's about time to start talking about how they compare to any offense that's ever stepped on the field in the National Football League. I mean, 70 points only 3-4 times has that ever been done, including the postseason. 3 in the regular season, once in the postseason. And I do think it was a massive flex, by the way, by McDaniel. We can talk about this if you want. To kneel it out when he could have broken the record. I mean, I think that hurts even more, right? When and they know that you could have done this to them, and you're not worth my time. I'm going to kneel it out. I'm gonna take the high road. Were you on team kneel out or were you on team go for it?
No, I wanted the record. At the time, I wanted the record. When you heard McDaniel post game and he said things like it felt like chasing points and the message that it would send isn't in line with how he views things, and the karma thing, which I didn't put together either at the time, I just thought of it as, well, they have bigger goals in mind than a regular season record, and why play around with the football gods by kicking these, by taking these 3 points, it doesn't do anything for you in the ultimate goal of getting to the Super Bowl. So, but in the moment, man, that I wanted. If I was there at the stadium, I
Oh,
would have been, chanting as well to do it. I wanted it. I get it though.
let's not act like they didn't put their foot down their throats when they were up. What was it? What they I guess it was 56 they had at the time, and they
And they
were
took the
still
deep
throwing,
shot.
yeah, throwing go routes to Robbie Chosen. I mean, granted, it was Mike White, your backup quarterback, and if you can't stop Mike White and Robbie Chosen from scorching you, you deserve the touchdown on your head. So, but let's not act like they took it easy on them. But I mean, a lot of those touchdowns, eh, hats off, huge round of applause to the offensive line for what they did, because you go and watch the God's eye view of it and the all 22 and all that, and there are Broncos defenders, like it's like a war zone. These guys are just scattered all over the field, like incredible. That's how good and second, third level the blocking was. You don't have two running backs get 4 touchdowns in a game, which is, I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth, but 2 different running backs had 4 touchdowns in a game if your offensive line isn't firing at all cylinders. And it was great to have Tron Armstead back. Was that the difference between 36 points and 70? If so, let's go, guys. It's going to be a great season. But no, I do think McDaniel took the classy high road. The league knows who Sean Payton is. I mean, let's just take a second, by the way, and live on Earth 2 for a moment, Matthew. And let's talk about a world in which a retired Tom Brady and Sean Payton past his prime are the 2 big splashes of the 2022 offseason for the Miami Dolphins, because that was the plan at one point.
I can't even begin to imagine, what it would be like, especially knowing now how it's turned out and how it's going. If Stephen Ross had his way, right, that's what it would have been. We would have had Tom Brady here as the quarterback and Sean Payton here as the head coach, and who knows what that looks like. Certainly doesn't look like what we just watched and what we've been watching these last 3 weeks. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best first round pick they've ever used, right? The first round pick they gave up for tampering. Thank God that failed, man. I mean, because let's just think of like, some other team would have hired McDaniel by now. He would have gotten hired. The Dolphins were his only interview in 22. He would have had another round of interviews in 23. So he'd be doing this for some other team right now. Tua probably wouldn't even be on the roster. So maybe he's balling out for another team, or maybe his career takes a totally different direction. And, people try to use him like Brian Flores did, and it ruins him, and he's never able to do it. I mean, there's the butterfly effects of failing forward fast, I guess would be the way to put it, for what the Dolphins did in 2022. It's hard to get your mind around.
Yeah. You just made Cam Cameron smile somewhere by using that. No, it's crazy to think how things may have turned out. And I think your point on Tua is very fascinating, because he certainly wouldn't have been on the roster probably anymore. But who knows what his career may, be looking like if Tom Brady came to the Dolphins. It certainly, and the joy we're seeing out of Tua now on the field, on the sidelines, right, is something we never saw under Flores. And who knows if he ever finds that joy with another team or another coach. And maybe he does, but man, he must be so thankful that Stephen Ross's plans there did not come to fruition, because what a difference in him. And just seeing him on the podium after the games too, it's just, he's a different person this year than he ever was. Even last year, right? He started to come out of his shell a little bit, but this year there's just a joy of playing that we didn't see, for a while there from Tua.
Yeah, Flores almost broke him. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Brian Flores almost broke him, and I think it speaks to how we don't know really anything about evaluation of quarterbacks, and how situation and roster and coaching are such massively important factors. Hugely important factors. Tom Brady, maybe the best team sport player in the history of American sports, right? Perhaps more titles than Jordan. He is the standard for a team sport individual athlete. Oh, and you know what? If he doesn't get drafted by the Patriots and Drew Bledsoe doesn't get hurt, who knows? He was a 6th-round pick for a reason, right? He didn't have all the measurables that people were clamoring to get. You would hope that he'd have a solid career with somebody else, but you don't pair him with arguably, and I know this is going to anger Dolphins fans, probably the best coach in the history of the game. He doesn't have the same career. I think Patrick Mahomes is a similar deal. You separate him from Andy Reid. Is he doing what he's done over the course of the last 5-6 years? Probably not. If he didn't, certainly we're seeing some limitations a bit this year when his weapons aren't the same. But it's really, really, really important that you get the right coach and the right quarterback together, and you foster an environment for success. And the first, I guess, 2 years of Tua's career, that's right, he was in 2020 and 21 with Flo, could not have been worse. Could not have been worse. Year one, you have an offensive coordinator who comes out of retirement and doesn't even want to play him, right? Wanted to play Ryan Fitzpatrick instead. And in 2022, they have not one but 2 offensive coordinators, and none of them are any good. And you could still see there wasn't a great deal of confidence and faith in their quarterback. All it took was one of the brightest minds in our sport taking over, getting hired serendipitously, by the way, as we just discussed, because that's not who their number one choice was, and having the conviction and belief and vision to turn him into not just a good player, he is a great player right now. He is one of the 5 best players in the National Football League right now, and he's on your team, Miami Dolphins. I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth. Like, it's going to, like, there are a handful of stories I've written in my career that are going to haunt me, Matthew. A column that's going to haunt me, I am sure, is after the finale in week, I guess that would have been 18, whatever the last game of the 2000, Flo's last game, whatever that was, when it was clear that Tua was overmatched on the road. I think it was a Titans game maybe, and he was just absolutely awful.
Yeah, they had like a shouting match at halftime, supposedly,
yeah,
reportedly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And at that point, we didn't know what we didn't know. And we thought Chris Greer was the problem. And we thought Flo was making chicken salad out of chicken bleep, right? And I wrote the column, and I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but it's the truth. Stephen Ross surely knows that Tua Tagovailoa will never win a Super Bowl for the Miami Dolphins. They have to move on this offseason. And oh my God, talk about freezing cold takes exposed, dude. I mean, that's and it just shows you how little we know. I was trusting the people that were in charge, right? I was trusting Brian Flores that he was smarter than me and smarter than everybody else who had an opinion about Tua, and saw things in him that told him that he wasn't going to succeed. Trying to take the guy's knees out by going to get Deshaun Watson. Holy mackerel, talking about a butterfly effect there. If that trade would have happened, if Deshaun Watson would have settled those cases in time, this franchise would be completely different. Completely different. So yeah, I mean, I'll eat some crow with that column, and I've been on the record for the last 12 months now that I was wrong about Tua, but I was wrong because the people I trusted that had more information than me were telling me that I was right. Were telling me wrong things.
Yeah, it's incredible. And now here we are, right, 3 weeks into the season, and you just had a column posted on Pro Football Network comparing the Dolphins this year to the first 3 games of 2018 Chiefs. And that was the Mahomes MVP season and I believe first Super Bowl, correct?
Yeah, they went to the Super Bowl, and I believe they lost that one, correct? They lost his first, or did they win that one? 2018,
No.
The Chiefs have won twice.
No, 2018, is that when they lost? Okay, well, we'll look this up. That might have been when they lost to the Patriots on the offsides in the AFC Championship game.
Was that
offsides play?
Entirely possible. Regardless, I'm talking regular. Yeah, talking regular season here, and that was one of the 3 or 4 best offenses of all time. And the reason I made that comparison, it's an easy one. That team had Tyreek Hill. This team has Tyreek Hill. So it's kind of an apples to apples comparison. Young quarterback, really coming into his own with Tyreek Hill, and that offense was spectacular, Matt. It was so much fun to watch that offense. This offense is a touchdown better than that offense. I mean, that's what's absolutely insane. Okay, here are the stats, Matthew, that the Dolphins are first in the league. You ready? Points, 43.3 per game. 43.3 per game.
I know it's only 3 games, but that's mind-blowing.
Yards, 550.3 per game. They're number one in both rushing offense and passing offense. 188.3 yards per game rushing, 362 yards per game passing. You know what their yards per play is?
Is it in the 8s? Right?
8.4.
Okay,
they almost average a first down every play. Okay, their yards per carry is basically what their yards per pass were in the first 2 years of Tua's career, 6.1. Okay, and here's we're going to dig more into the advanced stats. Oh, real quick, their yards per pass is 10.5. 10.5 yards, not per completion, per attempt. Okay, EPA per play, which I know gets in the weeds a bit, 0.39. Like anything over 0.2 is really, really good, right? They're 0.39. Success rate, 55.6. Okay, here's their drop back EPA, 0.67. They are 2/3 of a point better per play than the league average. Per play, not per drive, per play. Every time they throw the ball. And their drop back success rate is 62.4. All right, so how do they compare with that Chiefs team? I'm glad you asked. Well, let's first talk about Mahomes, who won the MVP that year, right? That was his first of 2 MVPs. 2 through 3 games he's completed 5% better of his completions. Okay. Mahomes was 66.7. Tua is 71.3. Tua has 130 more yards in 3 games. He averages a half a yard more attempt. Oh, and by the way, all these stats I'm talking through the first 3 games, the Chiefs, that was the Chiefs' high watermark. Like their season stats were worse. So it's not like, okay, they got better throughout the course of the year and the Dolphins just had a 70-point explosion. They're going to regress to the mean. Right. This was the high watermark for the Chiefs too, okay? And I can get into the season stats if you will. Mahomes was playing out of his gourd, 13 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That was better than Tua. Tua is 8-2. But he's hurt because the Dolphins have had 8 rushing touchdowns already. Like the Chiefs that entire season had 16. The Dolphins have 8 in 3 games, okay? And their EPA per play is almost a 10th higher for Tua than it was for Mahomes at that time. And Mahomes' numbers kind of nosedove a little. Like they were substantially worse. He was 1.3 yards per attempt lower throughout the course of the season. His completion percentage was worse. So again, that was as good as it gets. Now let's go to the Dolphins overall compared to the Chiefs. The Dolphins have scored 12 more points, have 8 more first downs, have gained over 400 more yards, and average at 5/100 higher EPA per play. Then again, that Chiefs high watermark, which then kind of regressed to the mean. So they are on pace right now to not just break, and I think the Broncos 606 was the number. They're not just on pace to break the single season scoring record, but absolutely obliterated. Like they're averaging 43 points per game. They would break the record. Granted, it's a 17-game season versus a 16 game, so it's not exactly apples to apples. But nonetheless, they can just 35 points per game average the rest of the game, and they would still break the record. And they're averaging 43 right now. So what they're doing is there aren't superlatives enough to describe what they're doing on offense. And again, you score 70 in a game, that's going to skew it. But let's just take a second and talk about week 2, okay? Week 2, when the Patriots thought they figured them out, played 3 deep safeties and made them beat them underneath, the Dolphins still scored 24 points. Yeah. Right? They still scored 24 points in an off game for their offense. As long as Tua is healthy, as long as Tyreek is healthy, this team is going to average 30+ a game the rest of the season.
Yeah, you asked last week, is 24 perhaps the lowest total they're going to have all year? And it could be. After what we just saw and how they're able to move the ball, running and passing, and you take away one thing, they've proven now they can beat you the other way, right? And it's going to make opposing defenses really, lose sleep in trying to defend this team. So there's no reason to think that every game from here on out is 24 up. And yeah, easily that record's probably within reach. I also want to talk about the Mahomes Tua comparison because I already saw, and I don't want to get too much into it. It's only 3 games. People on Twitter saying, "Oh, the Tua MVP debate's going to be a tough one this year because of all the weapons around them and the offense that's built for him." And it just I don't. Every MVP usually has an offense that suits their strengths, and Mahomes won it with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. So why is Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle any different? Tua's depth of completion this year. So his completions, not his per attempt, but his average completion travel 7.5 yards through the air. Mahomes is only at 6.4 that year he won the MVP, his first MVP. Mahomes also got more yards. He got more yak per completion, 6.8. Tua is at 6.6. So you could argue that the great Mahomes was being bolstered. His stats are being padded by his support. That's what happens with MVPs. They don't do it all themselves. They benefit from support and an offensive system. And it's really early after 3 games, but we're already seeing that on social media. And that's only going to probably get worse because for some reason Tua is as polarizing as he is. For no fault of his own, because he doesn't do anything that is, that should be viewed as polarizing. But for some reason he is. It'll be something that as the season goes on, we're going to keep an eye on, because I think if these numbers keep, if he stacks these kinds of games on top of each other, he has to be the MVP, and he's the betting favorite right now by a wide margin. I think it was I saw plus 300 recently, and then Mahomes was next at plus 550. I mean, that's a pretty big gap after 3 weeks.
Totally. And here would be my rejoinder to those absurd haters. 70 points, 4 passing touchdowns, 23 of 26 for 300 yards. By the way, in 3 quarters, he did not play the 4th quarter, and he put up those stats without Jalen Waddle. Okay? He did that without one of the 15 best wide receivers in the league on the field. And again, the Broncos laid down. Totally get it. But I think at some point, people need to get over themselves, right? People need to get over their priors. And I did last year. I absolutely never thought we would see this out of Tua. I was wrong. Is that hard to admit? Maybe it was at first. But at this point, it'd be absurd for me not to acknowledge that, right? Get over it. If a dude is doing what he's doing, and he is, you look not just touchdowns and interception, but the advanced stats, he is not just by far number one in the field. He is lapping the field. Like, he is so, you see those XY axis charts, he's off the chart. Like, he is literally off the chart. If he doesn't win MVP this year and he continues doing what he's doing, the award is meaningless. The award is absolutely meaningless because he is the most valuable player in football right now. And the Dolphins would not be nearly as good as they are if Mike White had taken every snap so far this season.
Of course, Mike White, was 2 for 2 for 60-something yards and a touchdown, but I digress.
Yeah. Talking about small sample sizes.
Yeah, no, certainly. No, I'm just playing it out in my head what people are going to say, right, on social media. Well, we saw Mike White step in that blowout, and he looked good too. Yeah, in his 2 throws. No, certainly, and it's only 3 games. Still 14 left. He's got to stay healthy, and they got to keep this pace up or something close to it. But it will be a conversation that, as we move forward, will be worth having. When it becomes clear that you just can't deny it, that he is the MVP. But so the Bills are going to be a good litmus test for them. Before we move forward to that, though, a couple of things one thing I wanted to note. That was probably the best half of football I've ever seen from a Dolphins offense in my lifetime. When you look at 16 for 16 was 2 over 206 yards. The running game had 138 yards. They had 4 touchdown drives of 75 plus yards. I mean, these are kind of, things, video game, right? Madden stats right there is what that is.
I think it's beyond Madden. I think it's fantasy land. You don't see what they're doing.
Yeah, but now the flip side I wanted to, before moving to the Bills, is on defense. And
wait. Before we get to defense, okay. There was the one thing I wanted to bring up. And that was how effing boring it was to watch Monday Night Football. And it was painful, and it was plotting, and it was ugly, and it was everything the Miami Dolphins are not. And I was watching that, and not just one TV, but two TVs were telling the same story, because Joe Burrow, God bless him, he's gutting it out. That guy should not be playing right now, right? So with Burrow on one leg, that Bengals offense is limited. We know the Buccaneers offense is limited. There was some bad football we saw Monday night, and I put a tweet out on Twitter, and it was like, the Miami Dolphins have ruined football for America. They have, because now we see, bomb after bomb after bomb, and motion and quickness and all these quick throws and touchdowns and scoreboards exploding. How can you go back to that? It's like pure cocaine and going to Diet Coke afterwards. Okay. I mean, it's a totally different sport. It's a completely different sport. And I wonder, and let me ask you this, Matt, it's not going to happen this year, but at some point, does the league catch up to the Dolphins? Certainly not on defense, because there's no way on defense you can catch up to that unless you have 3 all-world defenders that just go up the gut and blow up plays before he even gets back into his drop. But do they start catching up to him and saying, hey, look, this is the future? What Mike McDaniel is doing, and Kyle Shanahan laid the foundation. Let's not act like the Niners are a boring watch either. They're a thrilling watch. The Lions can get up and down too. Like there are a handful of teams that are a whole lot of fun to watch. But I would say about 70 to 75% of the teams are stuck in the Stone Age right now. And does that gap close? What do teams do? Because what Mike is doing, and I'm not going to say they're going to run the table. That's crazy. They're going to have bad games. They're going to probably finish, I would say 13-4 is probably a reasonable expectation at this point. Maybe 14-3. They're going to have
that. Right.
What's
Is it not crazy to hear those words come out after, the preseason, and we were sitting here talking about, well, the offense looked like it struggled a little bit here in August.
Well, that just tells you don't believe your eyes in training camp. Okay. Yeah. But there is going to be a reaction. And I wonder, I'm curious, those games last night, how are ratings? Like, are fans still engaged when they know what the potential of what they could be watching would be? Like, you're going to get the Giants and the Bears on national television a bunch still this season because they play in massive markets. I think what the Dolphins are doing, A, is conditioning fans to want more, to expect more out of their product. And B, they're scaring the living bejesus out of defensive coordinators and GMs around the league, figuring out, okay, if what the Dolphins are doing certainly is a black swan, right? You can't replicate Mike McDaniel, Tua with his timing, and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill in the same field. But you can try. You can go a lot closer to that than what we saw last night in that Bengals game, right? I mean, there's a happy medium somewhere in the middle, and I really do think they are changing the game, and we're going to see teams know that to keep up in this arms race, you cannot be playing even 2019 football anymore.
Yeah, and I think this is what it must feel like to have been a Broncos fan, right? With Peyton Manning, even the Chiefs recently, the 07 Patriots. When you watch all the other games and you're so in tune with watching, the team you root for, then you're trying to watch the other things. It does. You're like, well, is this the same sport I'm watching, right? And it's a new phenomenon for Dolphin fans, because what we watched on Monday Night Football this week, those 2 games, it's kind of like watching the Dolphins in, the last 2 decades before, Tua and McDaniel got together. It's a phenomenon that every fan base of these great offenses, I think of, the Rams in the late 90s, early 2000s, probably go through as well. I think the league, it is a copycat league. Eventually, other offenses are going to try to pick apart this. And you wonder if the Dolphins coaching staff becomes, something that gets picked apart in the offseason. Is Frank Smith going to leave? Is Darrell Bevel going to leave? Because teams are going to want to try to replicate this as much as they possibly can within the confines of their roster, which, like you said, very hard to kind of, duplicate what they're doing as far as all the skill set and speed they have on the offense. But certainly, this has to be something that other teams are looking at and taking notice of, and we'll see moving forward, in the future years if everyone else tries to replicate it. That Kyle Shanahan tree, man, let me tell you, that is very impressive. Or should we call it the Mike Shanahan tree, right? Which I think McDaniel has said before in the past, because It was really Kyle's dad who laid the foundation for a lot of this offense. But
Well,
then Kyle and the group has just kind of evolved it.
yeah. It's wild though, because two branches of that tree we saw on Monday Night Football last night in the same game, the Rams and the Bengals, and they look nothing like the Dolphins. So you can't just be like, okay, you're part of the tree. All these smart things that Kyle Shanahan taught you, apply them. No, the game evolves. Like the Dolphins' offense is different now than it was in 2022. Like it is more complex. It is the changes they made are brilliant. I mean, Saban Ahmed called, I hate this word in football, but it's the truth. He called Mike McDaniel a genius because he was able to take, teams starting to figure them out a little bit and completely blow the top off that, allow your wide receivers to get a running head start to the line of scrimmage, like, what was it, like arena football almost.
Yeah.
What they're doing, there's some principles of arena football in what they're doing here. And, you can't stop that. The only way you can stop that if you're a defense is to be disruptive in the trenches, up the middle, to make too uncomfortable, to mug the receivers long enough the line of scrimmage that your all world Aaron Donald type defender can get penetration at the pocket. If you're not doing that, good luck, man. Good luck.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to see now coming up on Sunday in Buffalo is a great litmus test because of how good the Bills are defensively. Before we even get into their offense and what Josh Allen has done to the Dolphins in the past, the Dolphins are first of all, they're 1-11 in the last 12 in Buffalo, so just not a good place. 7 straight losses there. I know it's a different team, different year. We've said that in the past, and things always tend to fall apart a little bit in Buffalo. But the Bills' defense this year, right? So now we're going to get a test of a great defense. They're second in points per game allowed, second in yards per game allowed, second in EPA per play allowed, third in pass yards per game allowed. This is a very, very good defense, probably one of the best they'll face all season. If the Bills' defense can't slow this offense down, that is a sign that, this is something special here in Miami.
100% correct. This is the Bills are the 500-pound gorilla, right? We got some access with Dolphins yesterday and some players, and I talked to Christian Wilkins about it, Emmanuel Agba. They have been on the wrong side of a lot of bad games in that stadium. That's their big brother, man. That team has been. It's no longer the Patriots. The Patriots for 15 years were what the Bills are now, except the Patriots actually got it done once or twice and 7 times and won Super Bowls, or 6 times and won Super Bowls. The Bills, for whatever reason, can't get over that hump. But regardless, at least to do the things that Dolphins need to win a Super Bowl, which is win the division, get home playoff games, they got to win. Like this is if they win on, this is crazy to say, if they win on Sunday and Tua stays healthy the rest of the season, they're going to probably be the 1 seed. The rest of the way their schedule plays out, they only have 4 or 5 really challenging games left the rest of the season. I'm not going to be worried about the Denver Broncos of the world anymore after what they went out and did. Okay. In past lives, I'd been like, trap game, all that.
Yep.
Trap game, my foot, man. Tyreek wants 2,000. Okay. Tua wants the MVP. They want to be playing. I mean, I think I talked about this last week. Hard Rock Stadium is maybe the best home field advantage in football. It's not because the stands are packed, which they weren't, by the way, Matthew. There were a lot of empty seats in that stadium, which tells me that speculators took a bath. They wanted to, flip the tickets and they couldn't. But it's really hard to play in that stadium, and they need the head-to-head with the Bills. They beat the Bills on Sunday. They're up 2 games in the division over everybody, with tiebreakers over the 2 teams that you're scared of, the Patriots and the Bills. You're not afraid of the Jets because unless they trade for Kirk Cousins, that team is not going anywhere. Okay. So you would have 2 games up on both those teams with the tiebreaker. You're going to win the division unless you completely collapse, right? Completely collapse, because the Bills still have a more challenging remaining schedule than the Dolphins do. The Patriots, I think there's some severe limitations there. Their defense is going to keep them in every game. But this is it. Like you could not have a bigger week 4 game than what the Dolphins have in front of them. And I like their chances, man. I like their chances. I think, there's some questions on defense. We didn't really have a chance to talk about that. Jalen Phillips being banged up again is not a great thing going into Buffalo, certainly. But the Dolphins are never out of a game. They could be down 17 points to the Bills in the first quarter, and I'd still think they have a chance to win with that offense. And if they get it done, they're the best team in the AFC, and they're probably the best team in the National Football League.
Yeah, and the defense for Miami has been, I think it's kind of gone quiet that there's a concern there. They are 17th in defensive EPA, which I know, again, analytics nerds like me care about, others might not. I think there's an interesting stat called success rate that people may or may not know.
Explain what that is.
Okay, so if you allow 40% of the yards to go on first down, well, take it from the offensive perspective. If you gain 40% of the yards to go on first down, it's successful. 60% of the yards to go on second down, and then 100% on third and fourth down. So you get the third or fourth down. The Dolphins are dead last on defense in that, which is a concern. Now, what we saw against the Broncos in the second half, I mean, that game was over, so I don't care about that. But in the first half, they let a Broncos offense that isn't that good have 3 62-plus yard drives. That's a little concerning. There were receivers running open. We did see Eli Apple move to the bench, as we suspected we might on the podcast last week. And we saw Kader Kohu, right, stay outside. And you had Justin Bethel and Perry Nickerson come in as the nickelback. And Kohu did not cover the slot for the most part. He was an outside cornerback. Josh Allen, historically, owns the Dolphins. He averages almost 270 yards a game through the air, another 50-something on the ground. He has 31 touchdowns total in 10 games against them. And he's only lost twice in 10 games. It's a concern. It's a concern. You're going to go up to Buffalo, right? And this is just now the Dolphin fan and me coming out. You always have these high expectations that get built up. And then a team like Buffalo is going to come in and kind of, bring you back to reality, right? That's what we've been trained to do as Dolphin fans. I also want to point out nobody wastes 3-0 starts quite like the Dolphins. They were 3-0 last year too, and then they went 1-3 in the 4 games after. Since 1995, they've gone 3-0 7 times. In the 4 games immediately following those 3-0 starts, they're 8-20. Okay, they know how to waste 3-0 starts. So again, this might be a different Dolphins team. Maybe this is a chance for people like me who are, damaged Dolphins fans to see if this team is different, right? Because if you go into Buffalo and you're a 2.5, 3-point underdog, which, you're on the road, that's expected. You're about an even match. And you win that game, then you're starting to think, wow, this is real, right? This is real. And this could be something special this year. So it's a litmus test.
By the way, you're in charge of our numbers at Pro Football Network. How have you not had the Dolphin stats of the week by Matt Infante? I mean, you were just send me those after the broadcast, because I want to use them in the story I'm going to write today.
Oh, sure. I'm glad to pitch in. No, it's just, these are just things that I think of. And a lot of them are funny because a lot of them are negative, because that's how I've been trained in 30 years of being a Dolphin fan, is to expect.
How old are you, Infante?
I am 37.
Okay. That's a tough time to be born as a Dolphins fan.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not even from South Florida.
Well, we'll get into that another time. I think it was the colors of the team that made me a fan. And they're on TV a lot here in New York because they would play the Jets twice, plus Monday night games and all that. So, and they were just fun to watch, from what I understand too. I like, throwing it around all the time because Marino was awesome, and yeah. But I've been trained to expect the worst over my lifetime now. So we'll see what this week brings. CBS is sending the number 1 team. I don't know if you saw that yet to the broadcast.
I did.
So it's going to be a Romo and Nance game. It should be a Sunday night game. You wish flex scheduling was already, in week 4 and not week 5, because you're going to get Chiefs Jets on Sunday night as opposed to Dolphins Bills 1:00 on Sunday. The weather is in the Dolphins' favor. It's going to be in the 60s. This is a chance to show everyone that they are what, the record shows they are so far, right? This is the test. We will see.
Yep. What's your pick?
Oh, God. I think the Dolphins lose. I would, I probably wouldn't bet it because I think 2.5, I think 3 is about right. But yeah, I think a field goal loss in Buffalo is probably what happens in a high scoring game. It won't be the offense. I think the offense gets it done. I'm more concerned about what's going to happen when Josh Allen has the ball.
Yeah, you're probably right. But I just think they're on a heater, man. I think the way that they're playing right now, they have in the zone, whatever you want to call it, they have supreme confidence. Supreme confidence. And I think this is a team. Sometimes, some years, it's just your year, and I think it's the Dolphins' year to do something really special. And they're not going to be able to do that if they have to play 3 road playoff games to get to the Super Bowl. I think they're going to win the division. To win the division, you need to beat the Bills. So I think they're going to beat the Bills. There's nothing scientific behind it. I think right now they're playing like no other team in the National Football League, and they're going to get it done.
Okay. Well, you can get all of Adam's coverage of the Dolphins leading up to the game this week on profootballnetwork.com/Miami-Dolphins. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet, what are you doing? Come on, just subscribe. You're here, you're listening. You've made it this far in. Subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to it on YouTube and like it. And we will see you back here next week for either a celebration of Miami Dolphins being 4-0 or the, what went wrong, are the Dolphins frauds talk if they lose to Buffalo.
Well, that sounds like a headline of a Pro Football Network story, including the podcast within it.
I'm rubbing my pessimistic Dolphins crystal ball, and that's what it shows. So we will see.
You're not going to have to worry about it because the Dolphins are winning on Sunday, baby.
All right. Thank you, Adam. We will see you next time on the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast.